Welcome and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. For those of you who are approaching midlife, you might have been one of those who had a late start when it came to becoming a parent. But now that your teenager is a teen and high school seems to be that big challenge, many of us are wondering, will they finish high school and what will they do if they decide not to? Well, I was a parent who actually had one of those teenage kids who made that decision that by his sophomore year that high school just wasn't working for him anymore. The best thing I could simply do to him was say, well, how's that working out for you? What did you plan to do next? Just kind of have a conversation with them, because that's the way I felt about raising my children, is to be allowing them to have choices, but of course having parameters and some discipline involved in that. But many of us are kind of struggling to figure out what we can do when it comes to communicating with our teen and allowing them to know that there is value with the decisions that they make, as long as responsibilities as well. Joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today is someone who's had quite a story when it comes to her upbringing. She is a certified life coach for teens and young adults as a direct response to her experience. Her book is How I Got My Together. I guess we could probably say that word since we're not on the FCC airwaves. But anyway, it's an introspective workbook to help you find your passion and purpose in life. I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program today our guest, Maggie Steele. Maggie, thank you for joining us here on the program today.
Thank you, Daniel, for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
First of all, I want to say this is a really dynamic workbook. I wished I had seen something like this when I was a teenager because of what you've put into it. Now, first of all, though, give our listeners an idea. What was it like for you growing up?
Well, as an adolescent, I struggled with suicidal thoughts and low self-esteem. I grew up with one parent in prison and the other struggling with addiction. So it was challenging. I didn't really have an adult in my corner who I could talk to. And as a result, I ended up using drugs and alcohol to really help myself kind of escape from my thoughts. My hope was that if I could escape from my own thoughts long enough, then life would actually be possible. It would be feasible for me. But the drugs and alcohol didn't help. It made things worse. I ended up getting arrested at 18 and continued to make poor choices until I eventually found the support that I did need. And I worked out a lot of the pain that I was experiencing through journaling, actually, asking myself questions, coaching myself in a way to really get at my authentic truth. And a lot of the questions in my book are actually questions that I had to dig deep and ask myself in order to get up out of that dark place that I was in. So I remember I'd sit there and I'd refuse to respond to the questions until I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that it was my authentic voice responding and not some warped version of what I thought I was supposed to say or believed that I was, or, someone else's voice. So yeah, I have been working with youth since 2009, and it's really where my passion lies. I feel strongly that, by giving youth who are struggling these skills, these tools to help them identify their strengths and help them figure out who they are and what they want, that we can help them build their self-esteem if that's something they're struggling with, and we can help them really pinpoint what it is they want and support them in getting there.
Mm-hmm. It's fascinating, Maggie, that when we look at the landscape of education from the time that, for instance, I was in grade school, junior high, and high school to what it is now, it has changed dramatically. And as I was mentioning in the opening of the program, it seems that teens are less and less likely to graduate from high school. And you take a look at that and you think, is it the teen themselves, or is it really the landscape of how education has changed itself? What are your thoughts on that?
That's a great question. I work with so many teens who are frustrated by the system. They don't feel like it's supporting them.
I was sort of then, and we had more then than they do now. Like, you could play sports in high school. The only thing you had to supply was, well, a jock strap and a pair of shoes for whatever the sport was. Other than that, everything else was provided for you. But now, these poor kids, they got to pay for everything.
Yeah, they've got to pay for everything, and a lot of times their parents can't afford to pay for those things. And
right.
There are so many challenges with the way in which we're teaching our students, and the way in which we treat our teachers, to be honest. So I don't want to come down on the teachers. They're doing the best they can with what they have.
Yeah, but go ahead, Maggie, and give me your true perspective about what I'm talking about here, the real scape of the whole thing.
Well, I genuinely feel like sitting in class for 9 hours a day, being lectured at with little interaction and very little physical activity for someone who is growing, and it's not the best way to support our teens in not only building their intellectual capacity, but also in supporting them in emotionally intelligent, in building their social skills and their emotional intelligence. It's not helpful. What it is, I mean, there was recently an article that I read where someone sat in on a full day of school, and they were an adult, and I don't know if you read that, but they sat there and they couldn't focus. They were just, fidgeting and agitated, and they couldn't focus by the third class. So imagine what it's like for a teen to be sitting there and being told, okay, so now we're going to focus on this, and you need to listen to me speak here, and you need to read this, and, they need to incorporate, and a lot of charter schools are actually doing this, so I want to applaud them as well, but they need to incorporate more kinesthetic activities, more learning opportunities where teens can actually participate in a way that supports them in understanding how what they're learning is going to impact their life, so that they can not only engage them, but build their motivation as well and support them in figuring out, okay, so this is something I have to learn, but this is actually something that I can use when I get out of here. Right now, a lot of the subjects, a lot of the curriculum, it doesn't sit with our teens, it doesn't sit with our youth because they don't see how it's going to support them. And let's be honest, did algebra support the majority of people that are working in fields that don't use math in that capacity? And don't get me started on our history. I mean, we teach a completely warped, incorrect version of American history.
You have no idea how true that is.
So I find it challenging. And I mean, we live in a day and age where a lot of our youth are now learning about what it's like to be born in a body that doesn't necessarily reflect the body that you were told you belong to. So a lot of transgender youth are starting to understand that that's something, and a lot of schools don't support that belief and that understanding that, okay, some of our youth may not identify as female, may not identify as male, and yet we still have female and male bathrooms. We don't have neutral gender bathrooms, and that causes a lot of insecurity and a lot of fear, and I mean, there's so many things that I could discuss, but
sounds to me, Maggie, like it's pretty overwhelming when you take a step back and look at the whole picture. It's certainly gigantic compared to, I think, when I was that age.
Absolutely, yeah.
And the thing is, here's the thing that really kind of irks me, and being someone who's at midlife is, I think it's sort of the generational attitude toward the teen generation of today, and this is typically what you hear. They're unmotivated. They're not focused. They'd rather just stay at home, locked in their room, playing on their, technical electronic devices, not paying attention to anything. But I don't think today's teen outside of the technical landscape is that much different from when I was a teenager. You still have the same kinds of feelings. Where do I belong? What is my place in life? What are my special gifts and skills? But as you were describing, it seems like they're put into a system that kind of shuts a lot of that down to a point where your job is to cooperate. Your job is to conform, and to contribute the way we tell you to. And you can see why a lot of, these teens are kind of shutting down and, and not having the same kind of motivations that, say, we did growing up to just get out of the house and get away from it all.
Absolutely.
Is that what you experienced?
Yes, absolutely. And Brian Siegel talks a lot about that, how this is such an opportunity for the adolescent mind to be working with creativity, working with ways to kind of think outside the box. And if we're not supporting them in doing that, we're really missing an opportunity to support that young adult in becoming someone who can really contribute to the well-being of society. So, absolutely. It's unfortunate, and a lot needs to be done in order to kind of rethink education. And like I said, I believe there are some charter schools out there that are really doing their part and trying out different things and supporting youth who have different learning styles and making sure that their teachers are teaching in different ways to support those different learning styles. I mean, that's key. I'm a kinesthetic learner. And, when you're sitting in a classroom and someone's lecturing at you, for me, I'm not an auditory learner. And I'd glaze over, I'd doodle, I couldn't focus on what was being said. Now, that's not to say that now as an adult, if I go to a lecture, I can't focus. I've learned specific skill sets and ways for me to focus and to take in that information, but nobody showed me that as a young person. And I think, that's part of what I do as an academic coach is helping teens, learn how to work with what they're given, So I think that's a really important piece. If we're not able to have our teachers support students who have different learning styles, then at least we can support our students in understanding how they can absorb that information in different ways.
Now, Maggie, in the best way that you can, could you describe for our listeners what is pretty much the biggest, most common frustration today's teenagers have? Because I know that you've worked with a lot of them, whether it's life skills coaching or it's academic coaching. I'm sure they get to a point because of your experience that you really open them up and they say, this is one of these things that just irk me and I wish this would change or something like that.
Well, like I said, a lot is the way in which the schools are set up. I hear that a lot. A lot, which is, I would say, typical of an adolescent, no matter what time we're talking about, are frustrated with the fact that their parents do not respect them. They do not show them respect. And they do not talk to them in a way that supports them in having a conversation. Instead, their frustration lies in that they feel as though their parents don't trust them, don't believe anything they say, and just shut them down without having a genuine, honest conversation. So I'd say that frustration definitely shows up a lot.
So the biggest frustration that you see then is that the teens don't feel that their parents respect and trust them. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. See, I thought that would be important for you to bring up what you see to be the most common frustration in today's teenagers, because it's easy to point our fingers at an education system and say that the teachers need to do better. But look, these people didn't birth these teenagers. You did. And I find it astounding sometimes how often it is that parents pass the buck on the troubled teen to the school system. And I don't think that's been very right in the first place. It starts at home. Wouldn't you agree?
I definitely agree. I think that's the absolute truth. It starts at home.
Now, how is it that you actually began working with teens?
How did I start?
What gets their motor going when you start to engage in let's say someone who's been real difficult, that just has really shut down, has even been almost an anarchist, if you will. I'm sure you've probably worked with some real troubled ones, haven't you?
Yeah. And I mean, the key when you're working with teens, no matter how frustrated they are or, disrespectful their parents have said they are, the key is to engage, because you're not going to get anywhere unless you're able to engage. So I'd say it really comes down to just being real. A lot of the teens I work with, they've commented on the fact that they just feel like I'm not sugarcoating anything. I'm not trying to get one by on them. I'm just being me, and they really resonate with that. Teens can, spot your BS from a mile away.
It's funny you should say that, Maggie, because just before I was doing a segment on the grief recovery from the loss of a pet, and we got into the conversation, of course, about how when a child loses a pet, the kind of nonsense parents will come up with, they ran away and they're over at Uncle Bernie's, 3 states away, or, there's all these other things, and rather than just saying, your dog was hit by a truck and it was killed, because kids are so intuitive. That's their main modus of language. And teens, well, hey, they've got not only the intuitive side still, but then they have also got the verbal coming on as well. Just like what you're describing.
Yeah, and they've also got like you mentioned earlier, like those wanting to push the boundaries, wanting to get a better idea of who they are and what's possible and what's not. And I think it's challenging for parents, because all of a sudden it feels as though they've lost one of their children. It's almost like, I talk to some parents and they're saying, well, he used to do this, he used to be like this. Well, yeah, and that was him then, and he's still developing, and now he's in a different space, and he's experiencing this, and it's a lot. It's often hard for them to adapt and understand. Wait, where did my sweet little, Michael go? He's in a different stage in his life, and developmentally they're doing different things. They're pushing boundaries. They're trying out, and it's all very healthy.
Mm-hmm. It's fascinating work. I'm curious, because I don't know that our listeners actually got this from you, but you certainly talked about, what it was like growing up for you. But, you were getting in all kinds of, I guess, trouble, if you will. Is that what was going on?
Yeah, I made some poor choices, mostly related to the drugs and alcohol.
Sure.
And, it was basically me screaming for someone to pay attention to me, someone to see how the pain that I was in and the hurt that I was feeling, and also for me to just numb my own pain. So yeah, there was a lot of things that I did that weren't the smartest, and I think because of that, a lot of the teens that I work with, they recognize that, we have that connection. Like, maybe they didn't make poor choices yet, but they recognize that I'm someone who did have a hard time, and I made it out. So looking at me, whether you're a guy or a girl or however you identify, I'm someone who made it out of there. Mm-hmm. How did you make it out, And I'm sitting here working with you, and it's just, I think, to go back to your question, you said, like, how do you start with these guys, these teens? And it's engaging, but It's also engaging and letting them know that they're not alone.
Now, the reason I was asking, or kind of revamping that, is I wanted to know, what was that thing that came along in your life that you woke up and you turned things around for yourself? Was there a single moment, or was it a series of moments? What exactly happened?
I'd say it was a series of moments. You would think that the arrest and the 48 hours in jail would have done it, but that didn't do it. I think there were several situations, and I got to a point where I broke down, and I knew that if I didn't get help, that I was not going to be here. So I decided, instead of taking that path, I decided to at least try a different path before I made that decision. That decision was always there. The decision to kill myself was always there. But I decided to at least give it a try to see if somebody could help me. Mm-hmm. And I want to make it clear that the person that I saw was a licensed therapist. I do not seek people that are suicidal, actively suicidal, as a coach.
Now, it's interesting to note that as you were going through this transformation, that you began to realize, these moments that I thought were so bad really are fleeting. They're just very temporary. But as a teenager, you can feel like they're going to go on for a lifetime or longer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, tell us about the workbook, because like I said, I was looking through this and I thought, this should be up there for adults. Because there is some pretty wise stuff in here that you have people work through. Tell us how you came to develop this book.
Yeah, well, took me about 4 years to develop that book. And I have had adults use it and find it very useful. So, it's out there for anyone that wants it. I did make it so that it wasn't specifically for youth. And I think that a lot of the concepts are challenging for younger teens, but older teens grasp onto it right away. Mm-hmm. So I started practicing mindfulness in 2003, and that was one of the things that supported me in changing my life and in choosing life over death. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the book is around the journaling that I did during that time and being aware of that inner critic, that negative voice that would be telling me things. And as I mentioned earlier, I truly feel like journaling saved my life. Asking myself those questions, waiting until my authentic voice was able to answer, helped me get a better understanding of who I was and have greater compassion for who I was. I hated myself, and a lot of teens feel the same way. So for me to really cultivate that kindness and that compassion for myself was really challenging, and writing and answering these questions helped me to do that. So I was hoping that someone out there who needed it would be able to find that peace and gain clarity as well with the exercises that I created.
Now, Maggie, you said that you began to practice and cultivate mindfulness. Describe exactly what mindfulness is.
So mindfulness is simply just the awareness of the present moment, building awareness around what is here, what is now, and not having any judgment attached to whatever is here and now. So really just noticing what's here. If you sit and you just notice what your body feels like, noticing any tension in your shoulders, that's practicing mindfulness. If you notice tension in your shoulder and you say, oh man, I shouldn't have done that yesterday, I definitely pushed too hard, and that's not mindfulness. You're attaching judgment to the pain. So with me in particular, one of the voices that I heard regularly was, anytime something went badly for me, it was, you deserved it.
Oh.
So, yeah. So just hearing that voice and recognizing it and letting it go with no judgment, not beating myself over having that thought, That's when you're practicing mindfulness, when you're looking at things and being aware. And just showing yourself compassion and kindness in the moment.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's interesting as you were describing that, and I remember as a teenager, of course, when bad things would happen, it would have been neat if I had an adult or a mentor who came along and said, you know, what kind of meaning do you assign to the events that happen in your life? You know, like, for instance, when you said something went wrong for you, your meaning was, I don't deserve this, or I deserve to be punished. And I was kind of one of those troubled kids, too, if you will. I mean, as I described, there were a lot of kids in the school that maybe knew the principal's name, maybe they didn't. I not only knew the name of the principal, but I also knew most of his next of kin, and it went on and on and on. And it really got to a point, and this is true, that I think it was by the third and the fourth grade, and both situations I remember that I was required to go home after half of a day of school. Apparently the teachers just couldn't handle me, and I could never figure out what that was because I was always one of these easygoing, I like to make people kind of laugh. I wasn't like a bully or anything like that. But you take a look at something like that and the conditioning and the imprinting that was beginning to happen, you don't belong to the group. You know, there's the other thing, too, is that I also moved a lot. I was in a different school every year up until the 6th grade. And so, you know, making friendships were very shallow because, you know, there you had the friend, but then, you know, it seemed like the next week or whatever you were off to another school, and so much for the best friend. But you can see how, for instance, teens, whether it's this day or whether it was my day, when they would go through these experiences, the kinds of meanings they would begin to assign to events later in their life. You know, maybe you've lost a job, for instance, and you were doing a great job, but they just decided you're not here anymore. The meaning I would assign for that, you know, I'm not worthy of being part of this group. See, and it's from an imprint that happened a long time ago. So I thought it would be valuable for you to talk about mindfulness and the clarity that our listeners would go, okay, I see that if I pay attention, you know, to an event in my life, what am I assigning, you know, what am I actually believing is about this? That could be like the first step toward moving in a whole new direction, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. I am a huge advocate for mindfulness, and I mean, I incorporate a lot of mindfulness in the work that I do with teens. I think it's one of the most powerful realizations that the young clients I work with, you know, come to. They realize. For example, one of the exercises that we do is, you know, think back to a time in your life where you were really sad, you know, and I have them close their eyes and they're thinking about it. I'm like, what did it feel like in your body? What did it feel like? Who were you with? And they can immediately go there. And then, you know, we bring it back. And then I'm like, well, think about back to a time in your life where you were laughing hysterically. You know, what was that like? Who were you with? Blah, blah, blah. And it's amazing for them to just, you know, the light bulb goes off and they're like, whoa, it's like all I had to do was think and my entire physical being changed.
Right.
And my thoughts changed and my emotions changed. So what does that give them? That gives them the understanding that their thought creates emotion, that their thought creates those feelings inside, that, and it can even have a physical effect on their body. Another thing that we do is to help them create distance between the thought and their true authentic self. So this takes a little bit more time and it's gradual, but when that light bulb goes off, I tell you, there is really nothing more amazing to watch, because it's just like working out at the gym. You're building a muscle, you know, and I know that they will be able to walk out of the door just like I did and be able to practice using that muscle. So they start to understand that, okay, so that is a thought that I'm having. That's not me. That is a thought I'm having. There's that distance that we're creating together. And that is just so powerful.
Mm-hmm. See, and that is powerful, Maggie. Again, going back to when I was growing up, I never heard anybody talk like that before. And if I had, it would have been just amazing to realize the liberation that you could experience just from knowing that one simple exercise. What am I thinking? And this thought that I'm thinking, how is it making me feel? Because a lot of times that's how we act when it comes to an experience, is through that filter, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. And the stories that are attached to the thoughts. Mm-hmm. I mean, we have so many experiences that color our reality. You know, they so many things. Somebody told you something when you were in second grade, and you're holding that as fact. You're believing that to be true, and yet you're 16 now. And what's your truth now? Where's the evidence to support your reality? You know, and we all do it. It's very human. You know, we all get stuck in these thought traps. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's really powerful work. I think for anyone, to be honest, practicing mindfulness is definitely helpful if you want to kind of get out of your head and see that, create that distinction between the thoughts that are helpful and the thoughts that are just not really doing anything for you.
Not doing anything. And you remember the thought, too, when you would sit into, and I don't know about your experience, but certainly share with us if it is, if you have the same, when you would go to the parent-teacher conference, and you would sit there as the student, and, of course, the teacher wants to say the good things about you, and then, of course, you're going to hear the things that need to be improved on. And how many of us have actually heard, your son or your daughter, very intelligent, very capable of good work, but they're just not living up to their potential. Now, that one there, that could cause some serious imprinting as well. Then Absolutely. You find yourself at the age of 38 pumping gas saying, maybe the teacher wasn't, I'm just not capable of living up to my potential. But take a look at the teacher. Did they really live up to their full potential? Do any of us really live up to what our full potential was? Because if we did, I think we would be astounded, wouldn't we?
Oh, yes. It would be a beautiful, beautiful thing. I wish it for everyone. Yeah. I think there's a lot of weight behind our words when we're a parent or a teacher, or even a peer, a student, a fellow student, a friend, and they have an impact on us, and some of them create wounds, that that never fully heal, and then others, it's almost like this broken record that keeps playing in the back of our heads, that we're not even aware of, that we don't even know is actually controlling the choices we make and the decisions, because we believe ourselves to be this one way. Our self-concept has been, molded by these experiences and these words that people have said to us. Mm-hmm. It's fascinating.
Here's a big one, too, and I certainly want you to elaborate on this. In your book, you talk about how it's okay to be selfish. Now, it took me a long time. I think I was probably in my early 30s by the time I realized being selfish is not that unhealthy at all, and we tend to look at teens and adolescents, those selfish little, brats, it's all about them sort of a thing. But the fact is, there's something to be learned from that, because look at how often you see people doing all these things for other people. And one of the biggest reasons is they're looking for approval. They're not doing it because they authentically really want to. They're doing it for reasons that really have little to do, with themselves. But talk about why being selfish and, in a healthy way is so important.
This was a hard one for me as well.
I think it is for a lot of people because of the way we're raised. I mean, look at Christmas every year. It's not about what you get, it's about what you give. Mm-hmm. I don't like to give a whole lot if I'm not getting too much back. I'm sorry, that's just how I am. But I think a lot of people really are, if you got honest. But talk about why that's an important one.
I think it's really important. I think each one of us is unique in that we have our own journey to experience in our own way. And And when I talk about values with the teens I work with, a lot of them believe, as many people do, that when they hear the word values, they think, oh, okay, so it's like the what's good and what's wrong, and what's right and what's wrong, and what my parents believe, and what the family expects. And actually, it's about your unique values. What do you stand for? What is something that you gravitate toward because when you're with that, when you feel that, like let's say you value accomplishment. So when you accomplish something, you might be the kind of person that's just like that lights you up. So if you're not living your values, if you're not getting that accomplishment, you're not going to feel good. So anyway, I'm getting off track, but the point is that when it comes to being selfish, I think it's really important to understand that yes, you are living. If you're living at home and your parents are the ones that are in charge, as they should be, you are, a child. You still have an opportunity to be true to you. And when you start living your life according to someone else's needs, then that's when you lose sight of who you are. And when you become 21, 22, 25, suddenly you've made choices that aren't actually a reflection of your values and what you wanted. They're a reflection of the people in your life that you loved or wanted approval from, or, and suddenly you find yourself in a situation where you're like, wait a second, this is not at all fulfilling to me. This is not satisfying at all. What did I do? And that's when you've got to just take a second and get to know yourself again. Mm-hmm. And what I'm trying to do with teens and young adults is to help them get that clarity now, so that when they do move forward, they're making choices each step of the way that correspond with who they are and at the most authentic level, and are being selfish in a way. I guess it's the word that has the weight for us in society, but it's really just being true to you.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's more than just that the word has weight in society. I think it's, again, as we were talking about earlier, it's the meaning that we assign behind the word. It's selfish is all about me. I don't share. I don't play well with others, those sort of things. And I think that's where we went off track, because when that time came that I realized, well, you have to be selfish. You have to be sure that if there's something you're wanting to give, you got to be sure that you have that for yourself. Otherwise, you're creating a deficit, And, it's just so vital that for instance, that you understand that, because one of the things, as you were talking about, is getting someone to a point that they discover or they're able to express their authentic self. Now, one of the things we hear through school is, at least it's the old message, it could still sort of be the same way today, but I think it's changing because of the technological landscape. That is, you go to high school, you graduate. You go to college, you graduate, and you get a career. Now, here was an interesting scenario at one time. I was actually at a restaurant some years ago, and here was this young girl, I think she was a junior in high school, and she had expressed, as I was taking care of the table, about how she wanted to become a chef. And I said, really? And having been in the restaurant business for a good few years back in the day, I said, well, what you could do is go ahead and start a place like a Denny's. Just go there as soon as they can employ you and go there and work as a cook. And that way you gain all the valuable skills that you can gain as far as the actual, doing of being a cook. Then you just move around to the different restaurants for the culinary experience. In other words, what kind of cooking do you want to learn to do well in? Is it French, Italian, whatever the case is? Now, her parents were real adamant, no, she's going to go to college first. And I'm thinking, really? So you're going to make her go and spend money to go to college for something that somebody else could pay her to do and to do very, very well? And it really, to me, it seems heartbreaking that parents seem to decide the track of someone. I mean, how many of us really like it when somebody overpowers us and tells us, no, this is what you will do? You can see why there seems to be a lot of anxiety, especially in the youth of today.
I think there is. There's a lot of anxiety and there's a lot of pressure. And I think that the pressure can be overwhelming at times and can actually have the opposite effect of what the parents are hoping to achieve. You know, it can have the teen just stop trying, you know, and feel disempowered and demotivated. So that's where, you know, it's really important to just take a breath, take a step back, and try and step into the shoes of your teen. Try and empathize with them. Try and remember what it was like for you and what you would have appreciated at that point.
Mm-hmm. Such a wonderful book that I think people will feel very empowered as it opens up a lot of communication. I'm sure that as you've worked with teens as well as their parents, you've seen some real openness and some real turnarounds, haven't you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Share one or two with us if you wouldn't mind.
Well, I think one is it often happens that a parent is either an extrovert or an introvert, and they have a hard time understanding why their teen isn't like them. Something's wrong with them. Something's wrong with them. They're not doing this. They're not doing that, or they are doing this, and I never did this. And I think some beautiful transformations and understanding has come through the conversations that we have, and in helping them understand their teen better, and understanding that, you know, your teen is actually an introvert, and they enjoy spending time alone in their room, and that doesn't mean that they're upset or depressed. They actually crave that after a big day at school, whereas you want to go out with your friends and do these things. And I think helping parents with that understanding is often just really beautiful, and it supports them in communicating more effectively with their teen. Another one, well, a specific one, I guess, would be a teen who the parents got divorced, and the teen was just feeling as though the mother had let them down by getting the divorce, even though it was the father that had left. And in helping the mother empathize with what the teen was experiencing, because I often work with the parent as well as the teen, it was transformational. I mean, she was able to really, instead of feeling as though she was being blamed for something she had no choice in the matter about, you know, she felt, oh, okay, I can actually let go of my own stuff and step into my teen's shoes and feel what they're feeling. And they were able to have an open, honest conversation about what was going on. And the shift was remarkable. You know, it really opened up the doors for communication moving forward and an authentic connection. Yeah, it was beautiful.
Just an amazing journey. I think raising teenagers really tells us a lot about what it is to really raise ourselves as well, isn't it?
It seems that is the case. I can't speak from experience. I don't have my own teen. But I seem
well, you
to
got
be the
plenty
case.
of them. They're just not yours.
Yeah.
No, I just think that, you know, sometimes I hear messages out there that are so negative about today's teens, and I'm thinking, well, that may be true in some cases, but, you know, I'm looking at a group of this generation that I think is a heck of a lot smarter than we were.
Yeah.
You know, and I think they have a lot of value to give, and they actually do when they get that opportunity to do so.
Absolutely.
Now, Maggie, is there a website people can find out more about your work and maybe how they can get connected with you?
Yeah. So it's thelifecoachforteens.com, and my company is called Start Living. And you can email me directly as well at Maggie@thelifecoachforteens.com. I work with teens and young adults, so anyone 14 to 21. And yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email or check out my site.
And they can also connect with you on Facebook as well?
Yes, I do have a Facebook page, Maggie Steele, my full name, MaggieSteele.
Very good. Maggie, thank you so much for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today. Very encouraged messaging here.
Oh, thank you.
Very good. And again, you can find out more also by visiting us at beyond50radio.com. That is the number 50. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Beyond 50 radio program. And remember, live your day past halfway.